The growing trend towards corporate privatization of water is no imaginary threat. In the last 10 years alone, we've seen disturbing cautionary tales from around the world, underlining the damaging costs of turning public water supplies into a private commodity. In 2004, when Johannesburg, South Africa introduced prepaid water meters, poverty-stricken families resorted to fetching their drinking water from contaminated rivers, setting off one of the worst cholera outbreaks in decades. Forcibly installed prepaid meters are now illegal in that country. And in India, French multinationals Vivendi and Suez have also privatized local water systems, setting prices far above the reach of the poor. In 1999, after the Bolivian city of Cochabamba was forced to sell its water system to a subsidiary of the U.S. engineering giant Bechtel, the city's poorest residents were saddled with water bills totaling up to 30% of their monthly incomes. Only after violent civilian revolt did the government agree to terminate its contract with the company. The world's water, once considered a natural resource protected by government agencies, is now for sale to the highest bidder. But the threat of privatization isn't just a problem overseas. So what's our government doing to protect our water rights?
Well, this government's not doing anything. I mean, this government's for sale. And so everything's ready to be auctioned off, including the public's right to water.
Whether it's lead in toys from China, water, there's just been a notion that we'll let people regulate themselves and the marketplace will take care of it. Well, we're finding that there are fundamental problems with that.
There's a real problem when private capital gets into this kind of investment because their incentive is to make money, not to design the best project possible.
When you start to see water supplies being essentially privatized or private entities have a claim on public water supplies, you run into a real collision of moral values against the narrow profit concerns of corporations.
What they do is they use the infrastructure issue as a way to get their foot in the door. There is sometimes even corruption, there's bribery to get contracts. And their whole goal is to be able to get in there and make a profit.
I think this is one of the most serious economic issues in the world. Are we going to let our water supply be owned by a few interests? I mean, think about it right now. The cost of bottled water is more than the cost of gasoline on a base of a liter. When you consider that, you see that water is really, the next empire.
We were leaked some information for investors from an investment equity research firm called Boning and Scattergood. And what we saw in this report is that they are urging investors to get into the water industry. They say that a large failure of a public utility would help promote privatization.
The World Bank places the value of the world water market at $800 billion. That's a huge amount of money. So you can imagine why these huge corporations are salivating over getting into the water market. They really see water as blue gold, as just a source of profit. They don't see it as a fundamental right, as something essential for people and for nature. It's only a way for them to make a profit. So if it disappears, 10 years down the road, they've made their profit.
When Atlanta had this great idea, that's a joke, of privatizing its water, that was the worst mistake that this city could ever make.
The city of Atlanta took a bold step in the 1990s. It was clear that we needed additional investment in our water system, our drinking water system. And the administration that preceded me believed that they could get private investment to come in and bring private sector best practices into the operation of the water system.
What Atlanta, Georgia did is they signed a 20-year contract with a multinational corporation based in France called Suez to run their water and sewer system.
And they promised that this would be a wave of the future, a very successful privatization. Instead, it was a disaster.
It didn't work for the customers, it didn't work for the city, and it didn't work for the private company. It just hadn't worked.
There were boil water days, brown water. There was corruption associated with the contract, and the mayor who actually was involved in it eventually went to jail.
I got a $1,100 water bill. My water bill was basically, $150 a month.
The city had to hire an auditor because they were wasting money. United Water came back and wanted more money than they'd initially bid on the system. They couldn't collect the money. They couldn't provide drinkable water.
The service was provided in such a bad way that the mayor actually voided the contract for non-performance with Suez.
Unfortunately, the contract didn't work either for the city of Atlanta or for the company, and frankly not for the customers. We need the water infrastructure and water investment to be at the top of the agenda at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level.